Now, let's look at the tax equity investors and what is being offered to them, and we'll value their stream on doing it, okay? So let's go over here. Again, I know this is a bit small, but we'll sort of work on this. But basically, when we start talk about the tax equity investors, basically what they get is they wind up with 99% of taxes plus the production tax credit, okay? And so let's sort of look at this. So what I have done here is EBIT. This is EBITDA, so I've included that. Taxes are basically exactly the same taxes, okay, as a percent. That's what taxes would be as a percent of EBIT. Okay, 35% of EBIT. But again, we wind up with it being positive for the first few years, and that's a benefit to them, all right? And basically what we have is a situation, and then we have capital expenditures, no change in there. Then we have production tax credits, okay, for the first 10 years, all right? And if we sort of look at the tax equity investors, they basically get 99% of taxes, this plus the taxes, okay? And then what happens is they wind up getting 5%, but it's sort of negative for the next few years. Now, they wind up just paying 5% of whatever the production, so that's just this number is down here, all right? This is, note it goes for the whole period of time, which makes it a equity investment. It's just a slightly different way of doing it, okay, where it goes from 99% to 5%. That's to keep them in the game, say they're equity investors, all right? So what does that mean? Okay, so basically what they wind up with is these are the cash flows associated for the tax allocation, okay? Now, the other thing they get is cash allocation. This is the EBIT, percent of EBITDA. And basically, note for the first 6 years, they don't get any of that, all right? But going forward, what they wind up doing is between, okay, the next 5 years, what they do is they get 60% of the equity invested. Now, the key here is that that's to generate some stable flows, because as you can see, the tax allocations get smaller and smaller. And finally, what happens down here, okay, winds up being a negative, so they get 5% of the cash flow, which is this. And when you add both of those things together, okay, we add the tax allocation plus the cash allocation. This is the total cash flows that accrue to the tax equity investors. And basically, this play is basically for the first 10 years. All of this stuff down here, where they get some small flows here, relatively minor. This is where all the value is. And so if they invest $240 million, which is what they're required to do, the net investment winds up being $230 million. These are all the cash flows that they would receive, and they would wind up with an IRR of 5.6%. Now, if they want to invest and earn 5%, they should be willing to pay $246 million for this. Would be worth $246 million to them, okay? And the IRR is 5.6%. So assuming they want a 5% return, this would be a good investment for doing them, all right? So the key here is that we have to estimate what the taxes are going to be, what the production tax credit is. We also need to estimate EBITDA, which we're defining as cash flow, because that's part of the flow to them. So this would be, in each case, these are the total flows, okay? This is cash flow to the tax equity investors, okay? Okay, again, this is the total cash flow to the tax equity investors, all right? Now I'm going to stop for a second, and we're going to start talking about question D.